Hello and welcome back to Nerd Doc. Indiana Jones is back, but it's not the best return. You can check out our YouTube short linked in the description below for a quick spoiler-free review of the movie. But this video is all about the ending, main plot details, and historical accuracy of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. That means there will be spoilers for Dial of Destiny in this video. This is your spoiler warning. There are chapter timestamps, so you can jump around the video as you wish, and if you have any questions about the film, or just want to give us your opinion, leave a comment below. As a reminder, the film is still in theaters, so we can only show footage from the trailers. Please bear with us there. The basic premise of the film is that the Antikythera mechanism, also known as the Archimedes dial, a device made by Archimedes, has the ability to allow someone to travel through time by using irregularities in the moon's orbit to predict fissures in time. Dr. Voller, a former high-ranking Nazi scientist, wants to use the dial to go back in time to kill Hitler, take his place, and correct all the mistakes Hitler made, effectively allowing the Nazis to win World War II. This would, quote-unquote, make the world into a better place, in his opinion. The movie starts off in 1944 with a D.H. Harrison Ford and Toby Jones. Toby plays Basil Shaw, who was a close friend of Indy's during World War II and helped Indy track down archaeological artifacts that the Nazis had stolen. One such artifact was the Lance of Longinus, also known as the Holy Lance, which supposedly pierced the side of Jesus during his crucifixion. It turns out to be a fake, but it's a subtle callback to the 90s comic book series Indiana Jones and the Spear of Destiny, in which he searches for the real relic in 1945. At the same time they discover the spear is fake, Dr. Voller finds they hold one half of the Archimedes dial. Indy and Basil end up with the artifact, with Basil holding onto it for safekeeping. Years later, Indy takes it from Basil because Basil was going insane thinking that it actually worked, allowing people to travel through time. Basil was adamant that it had to be destroyed so it didn't fall into evil hands, but Indy took it and kept it in storage at his university instead. Fast forward to 1969, and Dr. Voller now works for NASA on the Apollo space program. Voller has conquered space, and now he wants to conquer time, using the CIA to help obtain the dial from Indy. Basil's daughter Helena, who is also Indy's goddaughter, pays Indy a visit and tricks him into showing her the dial, only for her to steal it from him just as Voller's agents within the CIA close in on the both of them. At this point in Indy's career, he's begrudgingly retiring. The original script for Indiana Jones 5 claimed that Indy was forced into retirement due to his vocal objections to the Nazis' involvement in the space race, but that's never directly stated in the film. Either way, Indy is retiring, but Helena's appearance, and seeing Dr. Voller again after 20 years, leads Indy on one more adventure. It's mentioned at various points in the film that Indy and Marion are divorced, which happened after their son Mutt died in the war, and Marion couldn't get over the loss. Which war is never specifically mentioned, but it was most likely Vietnam given the time period. Most of the movie is a race between Team Helena and Dr. Jones, and Dr. Voller's team to find both parts of the dial. Helena has her own version of Short Round, who goes by Teddy, and is a good pickpocket and general helper similar to Indy's various sidekicks throughout the films. Along the way, there's a brief appearance by Sala, who is in Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, who now has children. Sala gives Indy a quick hand, but doesn't actually go on the adventure. Ronaldo, played by Antonio Banderas, also assists Indy and Helena as a longtime friend of Indy's. Although this character has never appeared in previous Indy film adventures, Ronaldo provides a boat for Indy and Helena to obtain part of the dial, but ultimately ends up being killed by Voller and his men. The end of the film takes the science fiction elements of the Indiana Jones series to new extremes. We've seen the Ark and the Holy Grail, so supernatural is just part of the Indy universe. However, the end of Dial of Destiny sees Indy captured by Dr. Voller as they take off toward a storm that represents a fissure in time, as predicted by the Archimedes dial. Teddy, who has been practicing flying planes, hijacks a small plane to follow them. Once again, Voller's plan is to travel back in time, kill Hitler, then take over, correcting all of Hitler's mistakes, and winning World War II. Using the dial, you can set the date of whatever time you want to travel back to, and the resulting coordinates from the dial will tell you the exact trajectory of how you need to fly into the fissure in order to travel back to the desired point in time. However, as the plane approaches the fissure, Indy points out that Archimedes had no way to correct for continental drift, so Voller's coordinates would be off by as much as 2,000 miles. Continental drift is a hypothesis that the various continents of the Earth have moved over geologic time relative to one another, essentially drifting across the ocean bed. That would mean that any coordinates created in 200 BC would lead to a vastly different location in 1969. Realizing that Indy is right, Dr. Voller tries to get his men to turn the plane around, but they're too close to the fissure and the plane gets sucked in. They do not end up anywhere near Germany or the 20th century, instead finding themselves in Syracuse, an island off the coast of Italy, not New York, and they've traveled back to the year 214 BC and are witnessing the siege of Syracuse when the Roman Republic invaded the kingdom of Syracuse, Archimedes' home. It turns out that Archimedes didn't create the dial so that he could travel through time. Instead, he created the dial as a call for help from the future. Syracuse ends up losing the war, and Archimedes himself dies during the siege. The dial was meant to bring advanced warfare from the future to help Syracuse win the war against the Romans. No matter what year was put into the dial, the coordinates it would read out would always lead someone back to Syracuse in 214 BC. For this reason, it didn't matter that continental drift would mess with the coordinates. Archimedes only needed to know the coordinates of Syracuse in 214 BC, which is what the dial would always output. If he had created the dial to actually send people to their desired time and location, then they would have been considerably off course, but that's not what happened here. The Nazi plane ends up being attacked by the Romans, who think the plane is a dragon of some sort. They were flying low to the water because a trip through the fissure caused the engines to stall, which then led to the Romans damaging the plane enough that it eventually crashed. One of the locations Indy and Helena visited to find the full dial was Archimedes' tomb, where they saw he had the remains of a modern wristwatch, leading them to believe that he actually did travel through time. What really happened was that it was the watch of one of the Nazis when they crashed into Syracuse, which we see Archimedes picking up shortly after. Indy and Helena parachute out of the plane before it crashes and are almost run through by a Roman soldier when Archimedes' assistant takes him out with an arrow. This allows Archimedes to meet Indy and Helena, who also happen to speak Greek. Indy wants to stay in 214 BC, but Helena protests due to the potential negative impact it could have on history. Never mind the fact that Archimedes already has a modern wristwatch, and a modern plane is in pieces on the island. Helena ends up knocking out Indy with a single punch, and taking him back home by using the plane that Teddy was piloting to fly back through the fissure before it closed. Indy wakes up several days later back in his New York apartment in 1969, where he soon discovers that Helena reached out to Marion. Indy and Marion end up getting back together as the credits roll. There are no mid- or post-credit scenes for this movie. Now, taking a look at some of the historical aspects of the film, the Lance of Longinus is referenced near the beginning of the movie. There are biblical references to the Lance of Longinus, and some believe it made its owner invincible, along with the ability to command and conquer without opposition. It's also come up in a number of anime, having various powers as well. While new evidence of continental drift was published in 1968, a year before the events of the film, even now it's still only a hypothesis. It's unlikely Indy would be able to estimate how far off course they would be going through the fissure, let alone have anything beyond a cursory knowledge of continental drift as a whole. The Antikythera mechanism is real, and the history in the movie matches the real-life history of what is known as the first analog computer. It was found in 1901 in a shipwreck off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, hence the name. Obviously, it did not track fissures in time, related to the moon's orbit, but scientists have determined that it tracked the movements of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets in ancient times that were visible to the naked eye: Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Mars, and Mercury. While the device could have been created by Archimedes, this is not confirmed. It is believed to have been created by a group of Greek scientists, some of which may have come from Archimedes' school or the island of Rhodes. After Indy and Helena parachuted out of the plane in 214 BC, they were almost run through by a Roman soldier. Archimedes' assistant took out the soldier with an arrow. This is a nod to Archimedes' actual death during the siege of Syracuse, when a Roman soldier burst into his home and killed him on the spot, despite orders from the commanding officer of the siege to keep Archimedes alive. Some assume the soldier disobeyed orders because the advanced machinery Archimedes created to defend Syracuse ended up killing countless Roman soldiers. So what did you think of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny? Did it go too far, actually sending Indy back in time? Should Helena have let Indy stay in the past? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. For now, that wraps up this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves Indiana Jones.